Well, hello, Mary. I am here with Mary Horn, who is a counselor that I have come to know throughout this process of talking about some of these issues. And I think she has some really fantastic insight and experiences to share. And I really look forward to this conversation. So thank you so much for joining me today, Mary.
Oh, my pleasure. It's
And
been fun getting to know you.
yeah, it's been really fun getting to know you as well. And thank you for being so welcoming and generous with your time with me. I really appreciate it.
Of course, we've loved having you come around.
Thank you. So, Mary, would you start by just sort of introducing yourself and then mainly what I guess I'm interested in hearing is kind of how you entered this conversation and what have been the experiences and impacts of ideology in your work and professional and educational experiences, really.
So, I'm a devout born again Christian, so that's where I get all of my values from, is biblical truth. And so that's the foundation for every part of my life, although none of us are perfect, and I try to maintain that as my compass. Um, originally I wanted to be a missionary, but in my second career, but found myself in graduate school. I went to Argosy and graduated in 2012. I remember a diversity class, multicultural class, whatever that was called at the time. And it seems like eons ago now with, how the conversation has changed since then. But I was really struck by being in that class. And I think it was Obama and Romney were running for president. And I think there was just this really weird echo chamber where everybody assumed in the class that everybody agreed on politics or whatever. And I'm not Mormon, but I was just struck at how openly angry the attendees in the classroom were about Mitt Romney.
Wow.
And the teacher, we were on a break. I remember this conversation coming up on our break, and the teacher was kind of letting us talk, and I finally said, it's really weird to me that you guys just believe that everybody agrees with you, because I know that there are people in this room who are offended right now.
Mhm.
And there was no apology. The teacher didn't use it as something in a multicultural class to it would have been great, but she just went on to where we were at in, after the break. And you know I am, as an older person, I am comfortable with my beliefs. I didn't need to change anybody's mind in school. I was just there to get my education and get out. So I that was it. But I did have a couple taps on the shoulder saying thank you.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so, but it even then it wasn't as intense as it is today. Okay, so going forward, I was a generalist and went right into private practice. And then I got my first OCD client and fell in love with OCD and acute anxiety disorders, and have, it's a crazy niche where we're really underserved, and you have instantly have these long wait lists. And so I decided to open a group practice, which opens you up to so many other different scenarios when it comes to all kinds of situations, insurance billing and ethics and all kinds of stuff. And so, but the plan at that point was always to train interns. And so it's why I really connected with your story, because I had worked with the local grad schools and then the remote grad schools as well. And we, without sharing any client information, we were doing some groups. And there was some situation that came up around this idea of pronouns. And um, long story short, the group ended abruptly because of some offenses. And hopefully I mean, I took personal responsibility. There were interns in observing. And so I called the graduate school and said, hey, just want to let you know what's going on. And I actually haven't told you this story before. They worked really well with me. I mean, they were great. They got supervision of supervision, and they were really open to talk about the situation. I wish I could have gone back to each of those clients and had a conversation, but that we kind of agreed with the grad school and the supervisor that I talked to after the fact that it might not have been the best to, offend them any further. So,
Okay.
so, but of course, that school never sent me another intern,
Okay.
even though they were willing to work with me through that particular issue. It was important enough to them to not actually work with the issue. It was okay, we'll deal with this, and there was never a conversation. I just never heard from them again.
Wow,
So,
just gone. Yeah.
it's not unexpected. I'm not hurt by it. We still have interns coming in. It's just, exactly what you kind of expect in the Seattle area and in today's climate.
So it sounds like it's sort of it's like an echo of that previous experience. So that first experience where this really was salient to you was you were still in graduate school, and you had this class where it felt like, we're not going to be neutral here. We're just going to be out with it. This is endorsed from the professor, and it's just this echo chamber, as you describe it in the class, which and I don't want to assume your stance on it, but I'm putting myself in your position, and I'm thinking, I would expect neutrality. I would expect like an academic open inquiry. Especially we're talking about multiculturalism. I mean, yeah, it's the whole class is about like diversity, which is like, why would you not respect all the different things that could come up and make them into learning experiences and learning examples? And so,
It
yeah.
would have been great. It would have been so great to use this as like, hey, your students, let's talk about this. You can't assume anything about your clients. You can't
Mhm,
assume that everybody in Seattle is liberal. You can't assume that
mhm,
everybody that is of a certain faith believes everything from or even knows what they believe about their faith.
mhm,
I don't turn clients away because we don't agree on social or political or religious issues. That's crazy town. But when there's something I don't know, I've had Muslim clients where I've been like, tell me about how your faith is. This is how it is for me.
mhm,
How is it for you? And we've had some really beautiful conversations. I've learned
mhm.
and I mean, I care about people. I don't want to assume anything. And so this idea that we're assuming the one way is just nuts.
Mhm.
And I don't believe it serves our clients very well.
No, and the thing that you're talking about there, it really highlights something that struck me in my counselor education. You're not assuming anything about your client, and you're inviting them to tell you about what it's like to be them, to what is it like. And even if we are both of, say, the same faith, we are going to experience that differently. And so you don't want to assume that even if you have very similar experiences and backgrounds, and think that you're talking to somebody who reminds you of you, you have to know that what it's like to be that other person is different. And something that was really, it was in contrast to that. The way that I was being trained was that we're supposed to come in and have preset knowledge for different identity groups. So I'm supposed to just, that, like, there's this whole, it's offensive to ask them to do the emotional labor, right, to tell you what it's like to be them.
Right. And I will say, if I assume that I have a client in front of me who's a Catholic, and I assume that what I know about Catholicism is how they present, I'm going to miss a really rich interaction with them. The other thing too is, you know, my business is called Cornerstone. Hopefully that's a beacon for people. That's a Christian word.
Mhm.
It's also a building word. So some people who aren't of faith might not know that that's a Christian word. So I'm pretty open about it. But I don't, if people want to talk about faith in their sessions, then we do. I kind of talk about it just because I might say, hey, this is how it is in my faith. What is it in your value system so that we can find a way
Mhm.
to work through this particular problem. But when a Christian comes in front of me, I ask them, what denomination do you come from? Because I know enough about different denominations where I don't want to be offensive and say, hey, you can't lose your salvation. And I'm talking to a Pentecostal where they might believe that.
Mm.
And so it's diversity is so much more than just what it's been defined as today.
Mhm. And that you're bringing up something really important there, because you're talking about even within this is we have these broad categories that we're being told, which this it's just it's endlessly shocking to me that this is infiltrated counseling, where we're supposed to know that the individual goes down to the very smallest level. I mean, every single person is their own worldview, and it's just
Yeah.
so you're saying even within, American Christians, which is this tiny little group, and let's even make them white. We can even make them white American Christian. The denomination is going to make such a difference. So we're this intersectionality where you can divide people based on these really broad categories and think that you know something about them.
I
Yeah.
can't, these are immutable characteristics
Mhm.
that they're not choosing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and 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 how dare anyone say that they speak for an entire group of people?
Yeah.
I have a range of Black friends who would say, well, that's not how it was how I was growing up.
Hmm. Yeah.
One person say that they speak for the Black community. That's
Mhm.
not. Why aren't we calling that out?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if I said I spoke for the white community, you could hear how nuts that is. We're not even
Mhm.
allowed to have a white community, first of all.
Mhm. Mhm.
Like, fine, whatever.
Yeah.
But it's offensive to say that. It's offensive to say the white community, which is
Yeah.
nuts. That's insane. And then to then say that somebody would be a spokesperson for that is
Yeah.
just as nuts, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I
and
think.
it assumes that I'm white because I have a large percentage of Native American in me.
Mm.
And so, my joke has always been get off my land. You're assuming
Yeah.
that you know something about me
Yeah.
by my immutable characteristics,
Hmm.
right? My blue eyes and my light skin. You don't know anything about me.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And so when you're talking about, so there's this weird oversimplification and reductive ideology that you're seeing sort of come in, and you said you were what you're seeing now is so much more even than then, but there were shadows of it, creeping in even back then in like the 2012 2010 time frame. And as moving forward in your practice, was this issue with the pronouns? And I'm trying to kind of read between the lines, but I'd also it sounds like you're being intentionally vague because you don't want to risk saying anything that would be specific to anybody. But it sounds like someone in the practice offended somebody else by not using or.
Yeah, I will tell you right now, it was
Okay.
me.
Okay. Okay.
So, I offended the group because of pronouns. And so it was really interesting. I didn't get a chance to talk it out or explain. But I really don't want to say much further because I don't want to go beyond,
Yeah.
really want to protect anything that has,
Privacy.
yeah, with,
Yeah.
with that. And so
Do you want
um,
to explain your general stance
my
without
stance,
getting into
my
that?
my stance is a biblical stance. Males and females are born males and females, and I think it's really offensive for someone to put on lipstick and fake breasts and say that you know what it is like to be a woman. And I'm frustrated um at the feminists and women in general who would diminish femininity and femaleness and women. It's offensive to me, and so I don't need to say that in session, but I you know I my stance was I would prefer to use your name than a pronoun that to me is a lie.
Mhm. Okay.
As and you can change everything about yourself if you appear to be the other gender, and it's natural that you have, if you're a female to male transition and you dress as a male and you look like a male, I'm going to say he because
Mm-hmm.
that's how you're presenting.
Mm-hmm.
um, the the there were some that were wanted to be called they. That really frustrates me because my word, using proper
Yeah.
words,
Yeah.
word I'm looking, grammar,
Yeah.
using
Yeah.
grammar, I don't say they for a single person.
Mm-hmm.
This never comes up in individual therapy. And so what's really, really sad is we decided to take a break from doing our IOP because we wanted to figure out what we were going to do. And in groups, you are going to use pronouns. And so I chose to try to find a middle ground for my own situation and use just names.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't get to have the conversation.
It sounds like you're trying to stay internally consistent while still being as respectful as you can be towards the other individual.
And through a lot of circumstances, I was out of the group for a while because I had a family member I had to take care of. And so it was the day I came back
Mm-hmm.
from being absent, and it was very stressful. So
Mm-hmm.
I really would have loved to be able to have a further conversation, but it wasn't going to happen.
Oh, that's really too bad. It must have been a painful experience.
It really is. I mean, like I said, I have a very diverse range of friends, and so I love having conversations about these things, and it's never my intention to be offensive, but I also want my own personhood to be taken into consideration when we're having conversations like this. And so I felt using names instead of pronouns was my ability to do that. But again, I think if I was able to have a conversation with people one-on-one, we could have come to some agreement. And to be perfectly honest, after the whole thing, and after I talked to after I had supervision of supervision, and I talked to the school, I actually did decide to um, use the pronouns that my clients requested.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I never got that opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to share that with them. And so if if by chance any of those people in this group are in that group are watching today, I would love to let them know that after thinking about it, I came around to, if you prefer and I can remember to call you by a certain pronoun, I want to honor that. I don't want to be it's your truth, my truth. It might be difficult, and hopefully you'd be patient with me. But in that group setting, in that therapeutic setting where it was really important to them, I think looking back and having the opportunity to think about it, it was more therapeutic in that
Mm-hmm.
moment
Mm-hmm.
to not make that the issue in an OCD group.
Mm-hmm. 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 That makes sense. And so it was a new kind of issue that was coming up for the first time. And you tend to have a perspective on this. And so you entered into this and were feeling it out. And it was sometimes with these things when you don't have you haven't given it thought ahead of time and decided I have a policy or this is going to be what I'm going to do. It's kind of coming out organically. And so this was sort of this kerfuffle over pronouns.
And I'll tell you, one of the
Yeah.
things that came out of that was we did create a policy for Cornerstone.
Okay.
That our policy is that we will use the person's preferred pronoun
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
as an organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're making a choice on what seems to be most therapeutic and appropriate in the moment.
Yeah. And now you're talking about something therapeutic. I'm not sure that it is the most therapeutic.
Okay. Well, that's great to talk about. So it sounds like
that's a different situation because I'm working on OCD
you're working
and
on
not gender issues.
The presenting concern.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
So when it comes to if we're talking about gender dysphoria, I would probably approach that exactly as Jordan Peterson did in the Chloe Cole interview, where I would really have if I was working with gender dysphoria, right? But I'm not. I work with OCD and anxiety disorders, and it's not our wheelhouse. I refer, if somebody has that as their main concern, I refer that out to people who are trained in that area, right? But where it may come up in OCD is the questions that come up a lot of times with OCD, which is for straight people, am I gay? Am I, relationship OCD, where I fear that I might be gay, not because I'm homophobic, but because I think I'm straight. And what if I'm gay? Because OCD is what if questions all the time. I have gay clients who fear, well, what if I'm straight? What if I have to leave, my partner and go be with a straight person? Like, it's the same thing on both sides. And we do have occasionally someone that says, what if I'm trans? And we work through that like every other OCD topic. And we don't have any investment in whether somebody is, the answer to their question is yes or no. We try to help them work through the anxiety of uncertainty. Right. So our goal is to live in the uncertainty, and whatever the answer is, everybody is going to be comfortable with that. So it's a totally different way of doing counseling, which is why nobody works with OCD. Right. But therapeutically, I don't know that, especially the younger the child, like, I don't know that affirming is, personally, as a therapist, I don't know that affirming is the most therapeutic thing to do when that is what they're seeking treatment for. But again, don't worry about it, because I'm not going to, that's not why you're seeking treatment for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. And yeah, so for what you're talking about there, and this is kind of getting into a tangent, but when my first red flag when I started the counseling program that all these videos have been launched from, was the pronoun issue coming up in a group interview, where I was being interviewed with a group of other prospective students, and they went around and asked us to state our name and our pronouns. And I thought, that is so strange. I've never experienced this before. And it's a mental health counseling program, and they're going to ask us to tell them our pronouns, like as if you can't, I'm sitting in front of you. I mean, and this is the thing, I could see this being some kind of a politeness ritual if we had an individual in the group that was really androgynous, and you couldn't tell, and you wanted to make sure that you didn't offend that person. I totally get that. You don't want to be confusing, or offensive to that individual. You want to be respectful. And so if I'm in a group of 5 people and there's an androgynous individual, and we all have to go around with an androgynous name. Yeah. It's not Shirley or something like that. Yeah. or Matthew. but
Right.
yeah, Chris, or somebody who's really androgynous presenting, and you're just not sure. There's a politeness ritual I could see going through where we all go ahead and do that,
Right.
but
But
we weren't in that situation.
plug any other issue into it, right? I think this is a really great way to find the logic in something. Let's plug any other issue into it. If you and I said, "Oh, hey Leslie, it's nice to meet you. My name's Mary and I'm white."
Yeah, yeah,
That's where it's nonsense. I'm
yeah.
presenting as a female. It's you should be able to assume that you can call me she in a group.
Hmm.
You know, if you don't. And so the logic of everybody doing it, it
Hmm.
is this, it really is a pre-punishment.
Pre-punishment. Will you say more about that?
It's there's two parts to this. I'm going to punish you before you make the mistake, which there's no mistake. You're presenting as a female, so I'm going to assume you're a female. There's no mistake there, but we're we we're going to pre-punish, and not only that, but we're going to make you agree with our position, right? Not only do you have to do what we tell you, but you have to believe this along with us, right? You have to believe that this is the right way to approach life. So we're going to do pronouns and you're going to say them even when things are obvious.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's look at narcissistic behavior. It's really controlling people. There isn't anything beyond that. I'm gonna control you in this
Yeah,
time.
yeah. Okay, that makes perfect sense. And I see how you're framing that, and I like that. It is interesting. I come back to the idea of I think I could be okay with it, even that ritual, if there's sort of a, I think in that situation, if you did have a small group of people and one person who was androgynous, and we wanted to all make sure we were being very polite, there would be sort of a collective collusion in which we would all be aware of why we were doing it. And we would be doing it as a gesture of generosity and inclusion. So I guess that's where I fall on that, is I could see maybe I willingly participating in that in some situations. However, it feels very wrong to be forced to do it in the way that you're describing, this sort of forced agreement, because it's like you're grouping yourself with that ideology by adhering to their request. And I learned not to do that throughout that first time I did it, because I was caught off guard, and it felt so wrong to me. I felt so yucky for having participated in it. And I learned that there are other ways to get around it without causing a conflict. And so my favorite was just to say, I don't have any special requests. And then that kind of, they kind of are stumped, but then they're forced to be the one having a conflict with you if they take it further. And, it usually just moves along.
To me, that seems like I joke. I don't love saying couples anymore, but I joke that with couples, there's no such thing as compromise. And
Mhm.
I think that this, my example may really push this here. That's a really great compromise. I don't have any special requests. It's kind of weird to even have to say it, but because this it's just the whole thing's weird. But my example is you can't have half a baby. In a couple, you either have a baby or you don't have a baby. Somebody's got to make the decision, and one of them is going to be disappointed in whatever the decision is. And when the couple is loving and kind with each other, we're disappointed when the other person doesn't get their way because I got my way.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so an easier one is, do we sleep with the window open or the window closed? And
Mm-hmm.
we can present our cases with each other. When the window's open, my throat gets dry and it hurts in the morning. Well, when the window's closed, I get sweaty and I'm really uncomfortable when I sleep. If I'm the one pushing that and I say, I'm sorry you have to be sweaty, but I really can't have a sore throat in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I ache for my partner that they're gonna suffer. There is no there isn't that thing in this discussion.
Mhm.
right?
No, I
Uh,
think you're right. Because even just the example that I give, it's a refusal to play the game. It's not a compromise, really. I mean, it is in a way because it's like, I'm not going to fight with you and confront you.
but you're in the game because you have to say it.
Yeah, it's true. That's true.
So it's, it's like that's the thing that bugs me is no, you
Mhm.
are in the
Yeah.
game. It's so goofy that it's a game.
Yeah, it is goofy. Yes. Yeah. It's a strange place to find ourselves. Um, so would you tend to describe yourself as socially, politically somewhat conservative? How would you put yourself on that?
No, I'm extremely conservative.
Extremely conservative. Okay. So this is something that I really respect about you is that you have this, you're really open about who you are, but you're also really open to the other person being who they are. And I very much get a sense of um, genuine interest in other people and genuine respect for other people's positions, values, and experiences and sense of self. And that comes through.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I love people. And I mean, that's a part of my faith is I love people. And I don't need people to be like me in order for me to love them.
Mhm.
Um, as an evangelical Christian, I want people to love Jesus because I think it will save their lives. But if, and I'm going to share Jesus because that's a part of me. But those clients who know me the most, they put up with it and because they know I love them and they get their OCD therapy. Um, but I don't see what the difference is between somebody who is bringing mindfulness and yoga and that kind of thing into their sessions with their clients all the time. They just don't understand that this is a part of their values and they're pushing their values on their clients. We're pushing our values on our clients, period, end of story, because it's who we are.
Mhm.
And and a person who not that I believe there's anything wrong with yoga, but if somebody is really into mindfulness and yoga from that kind of Buddhist perspective, then you are pushing your values on a client if you ask them to do those kinds of
Mhm.
exercises.
No, that's
So
a really good point because your counselor, whoever you're working with, isn't going to be some blank slate, unbiased person, and we can't pretend that that's a thing. It's important to present yourself authentically and then let the person choose, can they work with you?
yeah.
Mhm.
And I've had people that decide they can't work with me or, that put up with me.
Mhm.
But it wouldn't be any different if, I mean, I rarely bring my politics into anything because that's not really, while I'm socially conservative, that's not who I am. My
Mhm.
faith is who I am.
Mhm.
But, um, but if a client says, hey, stop that, I'll stop that. Or if, but I have had clients that go, I've got my OCD treatment and this, values are such a huge part of the OCD treatment. And I am pretty rigid in my faith and that I'm not I need my clients to explain to me what their values are. I think you've heard me say this in our consult groups. It, being a person of a religion, whether it's Christianity or not, your values are kind of written out in your book, in your scripture, whatever that is. And so it does make things a little easier for people of faith to do the values work. Sometimes if a client knows when they walk in the door what their values are, even if it's not religious, great, then but a lot of times we have to go and look at that stuff and do some work with them on their meaning of life and on their values because they don't have something static that they know exactly is their meaning of life. And so
Mhm. Mhm.
and but one way I'll do that is I'll say, in my faith, this is how we do that. What's that like for you?
Mhm.
I hopefully have not said to a client, well, you need Jesus. That's going to fix you. I mean, good grief. I really don't. I hope. But yeah, that's the thing is when, that's the part of, even though we had that weird situation in the diversity class in grad school, I really felt like as of 2012, I did have a much more well-rounded view of things than they are today in the grad schools. And it's really, I think the thing that's the most distressing for me is how quickly that's come about with zero conversation of any, you just have to agree. And that's why I reached out to you when I saw you was, man, it's really sad that critical thinking was left at the door with you, because it seemed to me like you really wanted to have a conversation
Mhm.
with your school and they weren't open to it.
Yeah, and yes, you're right. And I think that it is one of the most stunning aspects of all of this is that there has been no conversation about it. I know I've said this a number of times. Probably people have heard me talk about this, but with with everything else, just using counseling and just using counselor education as a backdrop, every other aspect, and even like the social sciences in general, sociology, social psychology, psychology, there's a lot of explaining that goes into all of the reasons why we think the way we do around these things. There's so much of the study of these subjects is the study of why we now have these perspectives and the history of how we have evolved to take the stances that we take in this field. And yet here's this social justice perspective that's dropped like a bomb right into the middle of it and subsumes the other things, and nobody's talking about why. Nobody talks about, so prior to 2009 we used to think this, but in 2009 these thinkers came along and now we've changed. We don't have that conversation.
Yeah. And there's a sadness
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you. So the schools that I currently work with, you have to turn in their hours and you have to sign off and you have to grade them and you have to make sure that they're meeting all these requirements, which is really interesting because the students are very well trained in social justice, but very ill trained in how to be a counselor.
Oh.
And so one of my standard response on the very last question for the schools when I send my evaluation back to them at the end of the term, each term, is your students are very well versed in social justice. However, they don't they don't know some basics of counseling. One of the ones that drives me nuts is that I learned in grad school is the abbreviations for things, right? So diagnosis is
Mm-hmm.
DX,
Mm-hmm.
treatment is TX,
Mm-hmm.
client is CX,
Mm-hmm.
symptom is SX. That just seems to me like I shouldn't have to teach that to an
Mm-hmm.
intern. That should be something that is taught. When I was in grad school, we learned how to do notes. I didn't learn that from my internship. I learned that from my school. We learned how to take a progress note. None of my
Mm-hmm.
students know how to do progress. I'm happy to teach it. It is what it is right now. But it seems to me that I've got really, really socially aware clients or interns who don't know how to do counseling, who don't
So
know
it's like
anything
these practical the practical application skills are absent, and there's this heavy emphasis on these other things instead.
about. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And those of us in the OCD world have kind of a joke about grad school. We had one paragraph on OCD in grad school, and that's it. Like, we understand that you're not going to know anything when you come into this internship. But it really is sad that I have to teach you basic counseling skills before I can even get to the oddball stuff we do with OCD and in exposure therapy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So uh, it would have been nice to have them on some level. I guess it is kind of nice because I don't have to untrain them in the counseling skills and retrain them in exposure therapy. But guess what? If they decide not to go into OCD therapy, how are they going to go do general counseling at another organization because they know exposure therapy. We
Mm,
do we do general counseling too, but it's they're ill prepared, and it's and the students weeks in are like, wow, I didn't know anything. Going back, because this is about counseling, one of the things that I've learned that I have to do with my interns is we start with, what's your orientation towards psychology?
mm,
Because that was how we did grad school at Argosy. On day one, we picked an orientation. We might not have known anything about it. You picked family systems, or you picked Gestalt, or you picked existential, or most
mhm,
people picked CBT. And when you graduated, you had to present your master's thesis on, so you had 2 or 3 years to figure out what it meant.
mhm.
None of my interns have any concept about what they believe about psychology.
Hmm. It's just a big blank slate.
It's a lot of social justice.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and that's what they're being trained now, is to be social justice counselors. I mean, I don't know about every school, but I'm seeing a lot of that. Hmm. Yeah.
So, I mean, social justice is, yay, we want everybody to be treated equally. We want, people to be heard and seen and understood and known. But we also want to be good therapists.
Hmm. Well, and I wish that were what social justice meant, because that's kind of what I believed it meant when I first was introduced to the idea. And now I know that it's a term of art that is a specific package of ideological presets. So yeah.
I know you're interviewing me, but I said this to you before. I'm so proud of you
Oh,
for
thanks, Mary.
taking this on. And, it was thrust upon you. I can't imagine that this is where you thought you'd be when all of this started.
No.
You very well know that there are so many therapists out there who tend to agree with you and I on this, but they cannot say it out loud.
Mhm. My hope is that just through more conversations, it'll and this is kind of one of the social justice words, normalize. So I don't like to use the cat
Generalize.
generalize. Yeah. I want to make it, do what I can to increase the confidence people have in being able to share these kind of thoughts, because I agree with you. It's just like the people who tapped you on the shoulder and said, thank you for speaking up back in that class. They're afraid to say, because there are genuine consequences. There are legitimate consequences for people, and it's a balance people have to consider.
I,
So,
I expect consequences after having this conversation.
well, I hope that the consequences are that many people see that there's a wonderful OCD therapist that they can reach out to if they're having problems in their life, or if they know someone who is, or want to refer. So do you want to give a plug for your business? Do you want to give out your website or anything?
Yeah, understandocd.com.
Okay. Well, I thank you so much. Is there anything that you think we didn't bring up that you want to make sure we talk about, or any final
I
thoughts?
think I think that I think that as an OCD therapist and seeing so many clients afraid to live in uncertainty, I think that this is one of those conversations that, it's why I wanted to talk to you about it, because I'm going to, this is an exposure for me. I don't know what's going to come out of this and who's going to be mad at me for being honest and talking to you. And I'm willing to live in that uncertainty and to deal with consequences, because I believe truth is truth, and I am who I am.
Well,
So
that's
we have to
really,
live by our values.
yeah, that's spoken with integrity. And thank you. And I really value your contribution to all of this. You're doing a fantastic job of standing in your truth and being who you are. And again, I really think it's so important, if you're going to see a counselor, to know that that's a person. That's not a machine. It's not a blank slate. The way that we're teaching it now, it's becoming very mechanized and very technical. It's almost like they're training technicians, but that's not the case. And you make some really good points about everybody that you go and talk with is going to have their own internal value system. We can't pretend like we don't. We are who we are. And the authenticity of that in relationship, although the focus is always on the client and not on the practitioner, being an authentic, showing your authentic self
Yeah.
is part of the package, and it can't be denied. So yeah. Well,
I would say that that was the biggest thing in that group that that I was sad about, was that the problem became about me, and you know, it shouldn't have been. So again, I wish I could apologize for
yeah.
that to those people in that group, but
Well, and I think that that's kind of the ultimate. We're all still growing and learning, and it sounds like one of the things you took away from that is that despite feeling like there's some questionable utility in honoring some of these requests, it's still not the main point, and it's not the main focus that you, after thinking about it, feel like should have been. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing with me today, Mary. It's really nice to talk with you.
you too.